Hello, today we're reading from Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos. And we're reading from Book the Second, Chapter 3 today. The familiarity of the regions of the earth with the triplicities and the planets. It has been already stated that there are four triplicities distinguishable in the zodiac. The first, composed of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, is the northwest triplicity, and Jupiter has chief dominion over it on behalf of its northern proportion, but Mars also rules with him in reference to the west. The second, consisting of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, is the southeast, and in this triplicity, Venus bears chief rule, and in consequence of the southern proportion, but Saturn also governs with her in consideration of the east. The third, composed of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, is northeast, and Saturn is here the principal lord in consequence of the eastern proportion. Jupiter, however, governs with him in reference to the north. The fourth triplicity is constituted of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and is southwest. It owns Mars as its principal ruler in consideration of its western proportion, and on behalf of the south, it is also governed by Venus. The four triplicities being thus established, the whole inhabited earth is accordingly divided into four parts, agreeing with the number of the triplicities. It is divided latitudinally by the line of the Mediterranean Sea from the Straits of Hercules to the Isaachan Gulf, continued onwards through the mountainous ridge extending towards the east. And by this latitudinal division, its southern and northern parts are defined. Its longitudinal division is made by the line of the Arabian Gulf, the Aegean Sea, Pontus, and the Lake Maeotis, and by this line are separated its eastern and western parts. Of the four quadrants of the earth, thus agreeing in number with the four triplicities, one is situated in the northwest of the entire earth and contains Celto-Galatia, or as it is commonly called, Europe. Opposed to this quadrant lies that to the southeast towards eastern Ethiopia. It is called the southern part of Asia Magna. Another quadrant of the entire earth is in the northeast, about Scythia, and is called the northern part of Asia Magna. To this is opposed the quadrant to the southwest, which lies about western Ethiopia and is known by the general name of Libya. Each of these quadrants contains certain parts which, in comparison with its other parts, lie more contiguous to the middle of the earth, and these parts, in respect to the quadrant to which they belong, have a situation opposite to the rest of that quadrant, in the same manner as the quadrant itself is situated in regard to the rest of the earth. For instance, in the quadrant of Europe, which is situated on the northwest of the whole earth, those parts of it which lie toward the middle of the earth and near the angles of the other quadrants are manifestly situated in the southeast of that quadrant. The like rule obtains in regard to the other quadrants, and hence it is evident that each quadrant is in familiarity with two oppositely placed triplicities, its whole extent being adapted to the one triplicity which governs it as an entire quadrant, but in particular parts situated about the middle of the earth and lying in regards to the rest of the quadrant in a direction contrary to that assigned to the whole quadrant altogether, being adapted to the other triplicity which rules the particular quadrant lying opposite to it. The planets exercising dominion in both these triplicities also hold familiarity with these particular parts, but with the other more remote parts of any quadrant, only those planets hold familiarity which rule in the single triplicity to which the whole quadrant is allotted. With the said particular parts about the middle of the earth, Mercury also, as well as other planets in dominion, bears familiarity in consideration of his meditative condition and common nature. Under this arrangement, it follows that the northwestern parts of the first quadrant, or that of Europe, are in familiarity with the northwest triplicity composed of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and they are accordingly governed by the lords of that triplicity, Jupiter and Mars, vespertine. These parts, as distinguished by their appropriation to the entire nations, are Britain, Galatia, Germany, Barsania, Italy, Apulia, Sicily, Gaul, Tuscany, Celtica, and Spain. And since the triplicity itself and the planets connected with it in dominion are adapted to command, the natives of these countries are consequently impatient of restraint, lovers of freedom, warlike, industrious, imperious, cleanly, and high-minded. But owing to the vespertine configuration of Jupiter and Mars, as well as the masculine condition of the anterior parts of the triplicity, and the feminine condition of its latter parts, these said nations regard women with scorn and indifference. They are, however, still careful of the community, brave and faithful, affectionate in their families, and perform good and kind actions. Among the countries named before, Britain, Galatia, Germany, and Barsania have a greater share of familiarity with Aries and Mars, and their inhabitants are accordingly wilder, bolder, and more ferocious. Italy, Apulia, Sicily, and Gaul are in familiarity with Leo and the Sun, and the natives of these countries are more imperious, yet kind and benevolent, and careful of the commonwealth. Tuscany, Celtica, and Spain are connected with Sagittarius and Jupiter, and their inhabitants are lovers of freedom, simplicity, and elegance. The southeastern parts of this quadrant, which are situated toward the middle of the earth, viz. Thrace, Macedonia, Illyria, Hellas, Achaea, and Crete, as well as the Cyclad Isles and the shores of Asia Minor and of Cyprus, assume in addition a connection with the southeast triplicity, which is composed of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, and ruled by Venus and Saturn. And in consequence of the vicinity of these regions to the middle of the earth, Mercury likewise has a proportionate dominion over them. Hence, their inhabitants, being subjected to the rulers of both triplicities, enjoy a favorable temperament of mind and of body. From Mars they imbibe their fitness for command, their courage and impatience of restraint. From Jupiter, their love of freedom, their self-rule, their skill in guiding public affairs and in legislation. Through the influence of Venus, they are also lovers of the arts and sciences, as well as of music and poetry, of public shows and all the refinements of life. And from Mercury, they deduce their hospitality, their fondness for society and communion, their love of equity and of literature, and their power of eloquence. They're also in the highest degree conversant with sacred mysteries, owing to the vespertine figuration of Venus. It is further to be observed that these last named countries, that the inhabitants of the Cyclad Isles and of the shores of Asia Minor and of Cyprus are more particularly under the influence of Taurus and Venus, and are therefore voluptuous, fond of elegance, and overstudious in their attention to the body. The people of Hellas, Achaea, and Crete have a stronger familiarity with Virgo and Mercury, and are therefore learned and scientific, preferring the cultivation of the mind to the care of the body. The people of Macedonia, Thrace, and Illyria are chiefly influenced by Capricorn and Saturn, whence they are greedy of wealth, inferior in civilization, and have no ordinances of civil polity. The second quadrant consists of the southern division of Asia Magna. Such of its parts are contained in India, Ariana, Gedrosia, Parthia, Media, Persia, Babylonia, Mesopotamia, and Assyria, are situated in the southeast of the whole earth, and have due familiarity with the southeast triplicity composed of Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, and consequently with Venus, Mercury, and Saturn. In matutine figuration, the nature of the inhabitants of these countries is obedient to the dominion of these ruling influences. They worship Venus under the name of Isis, and they also pay devotion to Saturn, invoking him by the name of Mithran Helios. Many of them likewise foretell future events, and they consecrate to the gods some of their bodily members, to which superstition they are induced by the nature of the figuration of the planets before mentioned. They are moreover hot in constitution, amorous and lustful, fond of acting, singing, and dancing, gaudy in their dresses and ornaments owing to the influence of Venus. Saturn, however, inclines them to simplicity of conduct, and in consequence to the matutine figuration, they address their women publicly. There are also many among them who beget children by their own mothers. The matutine figurations also influence their mode of worship, which is performed by prostration of the breast, because the heart is the nobler part of the body, and in its vivifying faculties acts like the sun. And although the influence of Venus makes the people, generally speaking, finical and effeminate in their personal adornment and apparel, yet the connection place triplicities, its whole extent being adapted to the one triplicity which governs it as an entire quadrant, but its particular parts situated about the middle of the earth and lying, as regards the rest of the quadrant, in a direction contrary to that assigned to the whole quadrant altogether, being adapted to the other triplicity which rules the particular quadrant lying opposite to it. The planets exercising dominion in both these triplicities also hold familiarity with these particular parts, but with the other more remote parts of any quadrant, only those planets hold familiarity which rule in the single triplicity to which the whole quadrant is allotted. With the said particular parts about the middle of the earth, Mercury also, as well as the other planets in dominion, bears familiarity in consideration of his meditative condition and common nature. Under this arrangement, it follows that the northwestern parts of the first quadrant, or that of Europe, are in familiarity with the northwest triplicity, composed of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, and they are accordingly governed by the lords of that triplicity, Jupiter and Mars Vespertine. These parts, as distinguished by their appropriation to entire nations, are Britain, Galatia, Germany, Barsania, Italy, Apulia, Sicily, Gaul, Tuscany, Celtica, and Spain. And since the triplicity itself and the planets connected with it in dominion are adapted to command, the native of these countries are consequent. Really? Okay, I messed up. I'm going to read the end of where I was, and I'm going to continue. The matutine figurations also include their mode of worship, which is performed by prostration of the breast, because the heart is the nobler part of the body, and in its vivifying faculties acts like the sun. And although the influence of Venus makes the people, generally speaking, finical and effeminate in their personal adornment and apparel, yet the connection which Saturn holds with them by means of the east still renders them great in mind, eminent in counsel, courageous and warlike. It is to be remarked that Parthia, Media, and Persia have a more particular familiarity with Taurus and Venus, whence it allows that the dwellers in those countries wear splendid garments and clothe the whole person entirely, except the breast. They are also fond of elegance and refinement. The countries about Babylon, Mesopotamia, and Assyria are connected with Virgo and Mercury. Their inhabitants are consequently studious of the sciences and of other attainments, excel in many observations of the 5 planets. India, Ariana, and Gedrosia are connected with Capricorn and Saturn. The natives of these countries are therefore ill-formed in person, of dirty habits and barbarous manners. The remaining parts of the second quadrant, viz. Idumea, Syria, Judea, Phoenicia, Chaldea, Orchinia, and Arabia Felix, occupy a situation in the vicinity of the middle of the earth and in the northwest of the quadrant to which they actually belong. Hence they are in familiarity with the northwest triplicity, which consists of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And they have for the rulers Jupiter and Mars, together with Mercury, by means of the figuration of these planets. The natives of said countries are skillful in trade and mercantile and all mercantile affairs, heedless of danger yet treacherous, servile and therefore fickle, and thoroughly fickle. The inhabitants of Coelesyria, Idumea, and Judea are principally influenced by Ares and Mars and are generally audacious, aesthetical, and treacherous. The Phoenicians, Chaldeans, and Orcinians have familiarity with Leo and the sun and are therefore more simple and humane in disposition. They are also studious of astrology and pay greater reverence than all other nations to the sun. The people of Arabia Felix are connected with Sagittarius and Jupiter. The country is fertile and abundantly productive of spices, and its inhabitants are well proportioned in person, free in all their habits of life, and liberal in all their contracts and dealings. The third quadrant occupies the northern division of Asia Magna, those several parts of it which lie to the northeast of the whole earth, and comprise Hyrcania, Armenia, Mentiana, Bactriana, Casperia, Syrica, Sauromatica, Oxiana, and Sogdiana, and in familiarity with the northeast triplicity composed of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and have for their rulers Saturn and Jupiter in matutine positions. Hence the inhabitants worship Jupiter and the sun. They are abundantly rich in all things. They possess much gold and are dainty and luxurious in their diet. They are also learned in theology, skilled in magic, just in all their dealings, free and noble-minded, holding dishonesty and wickedness in abhorrence, strongly imbued with the softer affections of nature, and in a worthy cause they will even readily embrace death to preserve their friends. They're furthermore chaste in marriage, elegant and splendid in their dress, charitable and beneficent, and of enlightened intellect. All these qualities are principally produced by the matutine positions of Saturn and Jupiter, who influence the region. Among these regions, however, Hyrcania, Armenia, and Mentiana have a greater familiarity with Gemini and Mercury, and the inhabitants are consequently more acute in apprehension, but less tenacious of their probity. The countries about Bactriana, Casperia, and Syrica are connected with Libra and Venus, and the natives are endowed with much wealth and many luxuries and take delight in poetry and songs. The nations about Sauromatica, Oxiana, and Sogdiana are influenced by Aquarius and Saturn, and are therefore less polished in manners and more austere and uncouth. The other parts of this quadrant, lying near the middle of the entire earth, consist of Bithynia, Phrygia, Colchis, Laxica, Syria, Commagene, Cappadocia, Lydia, Lycia, Cilicia, and Pamphylia. These, being situated in the southwest of their quadrant, have familiarity accordingly with the southwest triplicity composed of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, and are ruled by Mars and Venus together with Mercury. In these countries, Venus is principally worshipped. She is invoked as the mother of the gods, and by various local and indigenous appellations. Mars likewise receives adoration here under the name of Adonis, as well as in other titles. And some of the religious services to these deities are performed by loud lamentations. The people are servile in mind, diligent in labor, yet fraudulent, knavish and thievish. They enter into foreign armies for the sake of hire, and make prisoners and slaves of their own countrymen. Besides which, they are continually subject to intestine broils. These traits arise from the matutine figurations of Mars and Venus. It is further to be observed that from the circumstance of Mars receiving his exaltation in Capricorn, one of the signs of the triplicity ruled by Venus, Venus hers in Pisces, a sign belonging to the triplicity of Mars, and thence follows that the women have strong attachments and kindly affections to their husbands, are vigilant and careful in domestic affairs, and highly industrious. They also act as servants and labor for the men, with all due obedience in everything. Bithynia, Phrygia, and Colchis must, however, be expected from sharing in this general propriety of the female character. For as these nations are chiefly connected with Cancer and the moon, their male population is generally speaking slavish in its habits, timid and superstitious, while the greater part of the women, owing to the matutine and masculine position of the moon, are of masculine manners, ambitious of command and warlike. These females, like the Amazons, shun the addresses of men and delight in the use of arms. And in manly occupations, they also amputate the right breasts of their female children for the sake of adapting them to military service, and in order that, when in combat and exposing that part of their body, they may appear to be of the male sex. Again, Syria, Commagene, and Cappadocia are principally influenced by Scorpio and Mars, and their inhabitants are accordingly bold, wicked, treacherous, and laborious. Lydia, Cilicia, and Pamphylia have a greater familiarity with Pisces and Jupiter when their inhabitants are wealthy, of mercantile habits, living in freedom and community, faithful to their engagements, and honest in their dealings. The remaining quadrant is the vast tract known by the general name of Libya. Its several parts distinguished by the particular names of Numidia, Carthage, Africa, Thessania, Nasamonitis, Garamantica, Mauritania, Getulia, and Metagonitis are situated in the southwest of the entire Earth and have due familiarity with the southwest triplicity composed of Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. Their rulers, therefore, are Mars and Venus in vespertine position. From this figuration of the planets, it results that the dwellers in these regions are doubly governed by a man and a woman who are both the children of the same mother. The man rules the males and the women the females. They are extremely hot in constitution and desirous of women. Their marriages are usually made by violence, and in many districts the local princes first enjoy the brides of all their subjects. In some places, however, the women are common to all. The influence of Venus causes the whole people to delight in personal ornaments and in being arrayed in female attire. Nevertheless, that of Mars renders them courageous, crafty, addicted to magic, and fearless of dangers. Again, however, of the above-named countries, Numidia, Carthage, and Africa are more particularly in familiarity with Cancer and the moon. Their inhabitants consequently live in community, attend to mercantile pursuits, and enjoy abundantly all the blessings of nature. The natives of Metagonitis, Mauritania, and Getulia are influenced by Scorpio and Mars and are consequently ferocious and pugnacious in the highest degree, eaters of human flesh, utterly indifferent to danger, and so regardless of the prodigal of blood as to slay each other without hesitation on the slightest cause. The people in Thessania, Nasamonitis, and Garamantica are connected with Pisces and Jupiter and are accordingly frank and simple in manners, fond of employment, well-disposed, fond of the decencies of life, and for the most part free and unrestrained in their actions. They worship Jupiter by the name of Ammon. The other parts of this quadrant, which lies near the middle of the entire Earth, are Cyrenica, Marmarica, Egypt, Thebes, Oasis, Troglodytica, Arabia, Azania, and Middle Ethiopia. These countries, being situated in the northeast of their quadrant, have due familiarity with the northeast triplicity consisting of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. They are governed by Saturn and Jupiter and also by Mercury. Their inhabitants, therefore, participate in the influence of all the 5 planets in vespertine figuration, and consequently cherish due love and reverence for the gods, and dedicate themselves to their service. They are addicted to sepulchral ceremonies, and, owing to the said vespertine position, they bury their dead in the earth and remove them from the public eye. They use various laws and customs and worship diverse gods. In a state of subjection, they are submissive, cowardly, abject, and most patient, but when they command, they are brave, generous, and high-minded. Polygamy is frequent among them and practiced by the women as well as the men. They are most licentious in sexual intercourse and allow incestuous commerce between brothers and sisters. Both men and women are extraordinarily prolific and correspond in this respect with the fecundity of their soil. Many of the men are, however, effeminate and debased in mind in consequence of the figuration of the malefics, together with the vespertine position of Venus, and some of them mutilate their persons. Among these last named countries, Cyrenaica, Marmarica, and particularly Lower Egypt, are chiefly influenced by Gemini and Mercury. The natives are therefore highly intellectual and sensible and gifted with capacity for every undertaking, above all for the attainment of wisdom and insight into divine mysteries. They are also magicians, performing secret rites and ceremonies, and are in every respect calculated for the prosecution of all scientific inquiry. The inhabitants of Thebais, Oasis, and Troglodytica are connected with Libra and Venus, and are of warmer constitution and more hasty disposition, and enjoy life in all its plenitude and abundance. The natives of Arabia, Asania, and Middle Ethiopia have familiarity with Aquarius and Saturn. They consequently feed on flesh and fish indiscriminately, and live in a state of dispersion like wild beasts. They never unite in society, but lead a wandering and savage life. And we have a table showing all the countries belonging to each sign respectively. The familiarities exercised by the planets and by the signs of the zodiac, together with the manners, customs, and qualities, particularly as well as general, which they produce, have now been concisely described, but in order to facilitate the knowledge and use of them, the subjoined table is inserted to show at one view what countries are in connection with each sign, respectively, according to the mode above detailed. Thank you for listening.